Welcome to the State of Tel Aviv and beyond. We're going to begin this episode with a clip that's longer than what we would usually show of Charlie Kirk in a typical encounter speaking with college students on campus.
You create a company that's like close to being a fascist, and then
Okay. How am I?
Sorry.
Let's go through this. How am I a fascist?
dude,
Can you name one thing I believe that's fascist?
you believe that you on. But
I'm such a bad fascist. I let the people who disagree in open mic to talk to me for 2 hours uninterrupted.
Okay.
I'm an awful fascist. I'm more like a free speech liberal of the 1970s, not a fascist.
But I just want to say, Turning Point USA is a evil company that was funded by thousands of fracking companies, and
No, it's not thousands, but we do have some frackers that give us money. But
and then all it is making the rich
from
more rich.
fascism to fracking.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
Okay, again, I'm happy to have a debate. I can see you're getting kind of fired up.
I'm sorry.
So, but why are we evil? Like, we're having a nice discussion. All of a sudden, you're calling me like a fascist.
Because it seems like you just want the rich get even more rich.
We haven't talked about the rich at all. I mean, so you don't even know my positions on this stuff at all. The wealthiest people, absent Elon Musk, are all on the left. Jeff Bezos, George Soros, Mark Benioff, Mark
Elon Musk on the
Zuckerberg, Laureen
left?
Powell Jobs. On the left, yes. Can you name one tech CEO outside of Elon Musk that is a conservative?
I personally think. Let me think. Peter Thiel.
Yeah, that's one. That's one. Larry Page, Google, on the left, worth $120 billion. Sergey Brin, Google, $130 billion on the left. Laureen Powell Jobs, Mackenzie Bezos, Jeff Bezos.
If they're on the left, what has they done that was quote unquote to do the left stuff?
Well, okay, so Larry Page gives money to left-wing NGOs all the time.
If you're on the left, I don't think you will ever be this rich.
Well, they are. You know why? Because
they're not.
No,
because they're not.
The left is a scam. The left uses
How
people.
is this?
Let me tell you why. It's a good question, actually. The left uses people like you that think that, oh, we're going to fight the rich. Well, they protect their oligarchy. While you guys have to keep on working hard and never own anything, when we conservatives are the ones that actually want to restore the American middle class and bring jobs back to this country.
How would you restore?
Let me finish. The left uses people like you every day.
Who is funding? Dude, I have never seen a leftist organization come to campus spreading their propagandas.
Because the whole university is a leftist organization spreading propaganda.
It's liberal. There is a clear-cut difference between a leftist and a liberal. Please make that
You're coming
right.
after this in a good way, because every major, powerful, wealthy person in the country, over $100 billion in net worth, with the exception of one person, Elon Musk, is on the cultural left and gives money to the left. And you guys give them a free pass because you think that we're fascists, when in reality, we're the ones that are actually fighting to destroy the oligarchy the most.
That was one of thousands of videos of Charlie Kirk, who over the last decade or so was constantly appearing, showing up, sometimes organized, sometimes not, at college campuses and at high schools. He would have an open mic and he would say, "Debate me about anything." And he brought a very different sensibility to a lot of young Americans than they were used to being exposed to in their schools and universities, in society. Charlie was an unabashed, hardcore Christian conservative man, and he brought his message and belief to millions of young people over the years. He was controversial, he was loved by many, he was hated by many. But no one can say that Charlie Kirk was anything but well-meaning, hardworking, tenacious, committed, and he believed deeply. He believed in the work he was doing. As we all know, he was murdered on September 10th at just one of those kinds of gatherings on a college campus in Utah. Charlie Kirk's murder shocked the world. At a memorial service yesterday in Phoenix, there were so many Americans and others present, including, of course, President Trump. 30,000 plus people jammed into the stadium. There were gatherings honoring Charlie Kirk all over America and the world. He was mourned the world over. He was loved the world over. But we also saw ugly expressions of people celebrating his death and his murder. Charlie was also a stalwart friend of Israel and the Jewish people. He was critical, he was thoughtful, he was searching. He worked so hard to understand so many complex issues, including matters and issues, really complex issues, arising from the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. But he never shirked, he never shied away, he never ducked for cover. And he was also an unflagging defender of Jews everywhere against the surging rise of antisemitism. I could think of no one better to speak to about Charlie Kirk and the importance of Israel and Judaism in his life than Josh Hammer. Josh, for those of you who may not be familiar, has appeared previously on The State of Tel Aviv and Beyond. He's an American author, speaker, Jewish thought leader, and also happened to be a personal and professional friend of Charlie Kirk's. In fact, Josh spoke to Charlie and a few others on the phone for over an hour the night before Charlie was murdered on September 9th. They were discussing all kinds of issues associated with Israel and with the Jewish people, and of course, anti-Semitism. The next day was Charlie's last. I caught up with Josh Hammer on Sunday night. Here's our conversation. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Sunday, September 21st, the day of Charlie Kirk's funeral, and the day before Erev Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the Jewish New Year. Josh Hammer, thanks so much for joining State of Tel Aviv.
I appreciate you having me back. Thank you.
You were one of the first people I thought, of course, when we received that horrible news about Charlie being assassinated. And I know that you have been quite close with him professionally, and I assume as well that from that relationship grows a personal one. And you've spoken already publicly about the fact that the night before Charlie was murdered, you had a long conversation with him. There were a few others participating, and you were discussing issues with respect to his support for Israel that he anticipated might arise the following day when he spoke in Utah and in other talks he was giving. Firstly, my condolences to you, of course, on having lost a friend. And I'd appreciate it if you'd share with us what you and Charlie spoke about in your last conversation.
Sure. So, I've known Charlie for some years. Charlie knew a lot of people. Okay. Charlie was one of the ultimate movers and shakers in American politics, maybe even in global politics. He was literally meeting with presidents of the United States, foreign dignitaries. So he had a sprawling Rolodex. So the mere fact that I was able to get to know him, befriend him, I don't think is necessarily super impressive on my behalf. It's just I'm just one of the many lives that Charlie Kirk was able to personally touch in his far too few years in this particular realm. So I've known him for, 5-6 years, something along those lines. I got to know him initially when I was the op-ed editor at Newsweek. When I was running the opinion section, Charlie was actually one of the conservative columnists that was grandfathered in when I became op-ed editor. So I got to read his columns, edit his columns through an intermediary, Andrew Colvett, who's now been making the rounds. Andrew still is the executive producer on the Charlie Kirk Show, one of Charlie's right-hand men. So through Andrew, I got to really know Charlie, spoke at some Turning Point conferences over the years. And it was really only over the past, a year and a half or so that I would say that we became closer. I started going on his show, the Charlie Kirk Show, a wildly popular podcast and radio show. I started going on the show more often. And we started talking very frequently. He formed a small group chat. There were probably 7 or 8 of us total in this group chat there. He called it his brain trust, for thinking about Israel, for thinking about Jewish-Christian relations. He was very concerned about rising anti-Semitism. This is something that he was an adamant opponent of. It is somewhat ironic that there is really no one who did more on the American University campus, which of course is an utter cesspool of dripping Jew hatred. It is interesting and a fascinating historical footnote that no one has done more in the past, call it 3 years, give or take, to defend the Jewish people on campus than this young evangelical Christian. Because Charlie, if you look at campus talks for the past couple of years, he wasn't just getting asked about Israel. He was not just getting asked about two-state solution, about Gaza, borders, all this stuff there. No, he was getting asked about like the Talmud, which is crazy. And he actually was able to provide very good answers, better answers than probably 98% of Jews probably could offer there. So we talked a little bit about that sort of stuff, frankly. But above all, we really strategized about how to turn back the tide against rising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment on the American right in Republican Party circles among young Gen Z conservative activists there. And it got to the point where these campus talks that Charlie was doing, give or take, these are his words, not mine, he would say that roughly half, 50% of the questions that he got asked were all on Israel, Jews, which first of all is disturbing. It's mind-boggling. It's frankly disturbing. That is not a sign of a healthy society. So that's sobering in and of itself. But because of that, he did organize this Zoom call the night before he tragically was murdered. So the Utah Valley University event where he tragically was killed, just a day that will live in infamy, to borrow the FDR phrase from many decades ago. So that was supposed to be the first of a series of events, supposed to be the first launching a campus tour. So basically, before he set foot at the first event, he wanted kind of an hour-long kind of prep call. So it was me, a right-wing rabbi friend of mine who lives in Jerusalem, Pesach Wilicki, a couple of his producers, and there was one Christian pastor. And that was basically it. And Charlie had a list of questions. How do I respond when the students ask me about starvation, famine, genocide, borders, two-state solution, this, that, there. But the mere fact that he was seeking our counsel, and we communicated on a virtually daily basis through this active group chat and one-on-one, the fact that we were doing that, along the fact that he had that particular Zoom call with people like me the night before he was killed, I think really profoundly calls into question this narrative that he was getting ready to renounce his well-established lifelong support for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel. Now, Charlie was not a robot. He wasn't going to just provide kind of propaganda, kind of, automatically recite Hasbara talking points, right? I mean, he was his own man, and he was able to kind of form his own very smart person. But he was not renouncing the Jewish people. On the contrary, his support for the Jewish people and the Jewish state was not just a policy issue for him. It was really quite core to his identity as a Christian, as a spiritual mentor and pastor, Rob McCoy, who I've also gotten to know through Charlie. As Rob McCoy has been saying, Charlie and his pastor Rob are very much of the book of Genesis. God promised the land of Israel to the Jewish people. They're very much kind of Hebrew Bible, Old Testament Christians, similar to the Christians of the American founding, frankly. So this was not just a policy issue for Charlie Kirk. It was near and dear to his identity, to his belief system, as he made very clear in a letter that he wrote to Prime Minister Netanyahu back in May that I actually read in June or July. This letter was, I think, not acknowledged to be public until Netanyahu actually spoke about it the day after Charlie was assassinated. So I guess now it's fair game to talk about it. I read it months ago. Literally the first line of this letter that Charlie wrote is, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a close paraphrase. As a Christian, one of my greatest joys in life is defending the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel. That's how the letter opens, okay? So he really felt this. He was sincere in his convictions there. And, as I became more personally religious in my own Judaism, he was very much already there, religious in his own way as an evangelical Christian. That kind of only solidified our personal friendship, and it's beyond tragic what happened. Obviously not just for me, above all, of course, for his beloved wife, his widow Erica, his two children, really just for the millions, maybe even tens or hundreds of millions of people whose lives he inspired and touched. And it's really now incumbent upon all of us to try to carry on his legacy and pass the torch in our own small ways.
It's extraordinary to learn after his death, as I did, and I think many people around the world have done, is exactly what you said, that this man was so plugged in, so hardwired, so connected. And I just had no idea of the reach of his influence. And he was also, as you say, very ground principle in faith. And he knew who he was. He had a very solid belief system. But clearly, as you said, he was also getting 50% of his questions on campus tours about Israel. And the nature of the questions, of course, are very political, right? You're talking about what's going on in Gaza, military operations. And he could have walked away from it, but he instead chose to deal with it head on. And most people I know just don't. They duck for cover and run for cover. Of course, I mean, I don't know the guy, never did, but clearly that's not in his nature. But the night before, when you were talking, he was clearly wanting to feel stronger, feel more grounded, have more confidence in the arguments that he felt he was likely going to have to be making and presenting. Is there any one in particular that stands out to you as you recall that chat?
Charlie was a big fan of trying to do the micro macro song and dance, which means that he would like to kind of focus on both the micro and then kind of broaden it out to the macro. So the micro, for instance, the micro could be two things. It could be, let's literally just look at the two actors that are involved here when it comes to Israel's various clashes with radical Islamic jihad. On the one hand, you have just that. You have 7th century aspiring Sharia supremacists, fanatical Islamist Muslims on the one hand. On the other hand, you have the literal birthplace of the Bible, monotheism. So that would be kind of a micro way of doing it. Charlie was also, again, as an evangelical Christian, as someone who met his wife, he and Erica actually met in Israel. They were on some sort of pilgrimage tour. I don't know the exact details, but he's spoken many times over the years about how, regardless of your theology, whether you're Protestant, Catholic, whatever you think about what a Christian's faith says about the current state of Israel, regardless of that, what Charlie likes to say is, think of it this way. There are real holy sites here for Jews and Christians alike there. Who do you want to control these holy sites? Do you want the Jewish Israelis to be in control? Or do you want the Palestinian Arabs or some other Muslim authority being controlled? He was a big fan of that line of analysis as well. Those are kind of the micro things that he would focus on. The macro, because he was very passionate about this point as well, Charlie thought of himself, I think properly, as someone who was trying to defend and preserve not merely the United States, but also Western civilization, for which I would argue it's the last great hope for mankind, to kind of paraphrase the old Ronald Reagan line. And he really genuinely, I think, understood that if you intuit that Islamism, radical Islam, is a potentially existential threat to Western civilization, which he believed, and I believe as well, then he understood that Israel is ground zero of this civilizational clash, which, by the way, is exactly the argument that I make in my book, Israel and Civilization. I actually inscribed a copy of that book and gave it to Charlie the last time I saw him in person at this retreat in the Hamptons in New York a little over a month and a half ago or so. And actually, on that final Zoom call we had, literally, I think the last words Charlie Kirk ever said to me before the assassin did his evil deed was, he was joking to me. He said, "Josh, I'm going to help you sell so many books on this tour, because I'm just going to mention your book whenever the questions come up there." So, I clearly that kind of that style of argument about kind of framing Israel not merely through a nationalist lens, but very much through kind of a broader civilizational lens, the Judeo-Christian biblical West versus the Islamist barbarians. He very much kind of bought into that line of approach as well.
What was bothering him? What was disturbing him? What did he feel uncomfortable with?
Well, I think he was definitely deeply disturbed about rising anti-Semitism in the party. Look, he was of the opinion, I'm of the opinion, that if you have a disagreement on a public policy question, okay, if you disagree about U.S. aid to Israel, that's fine, and that's totally fair game. If you disagree with AIPAC's lobbying efforts, that's totally fair game. Hold aside for a second that AIPAC is often a boogeyman. They don't have the power the critics say they have. Hold that aside. If you want to make a good faith criticism on these public policy grounds there, that's totally fair game. What Charlie understood is not fair game is to just blame the Jewish people, to blame the Jews for your own personal lot in life. And I think as he kind of got older, especially over the past few years, he married Erica as they had their 2 young children, his center of gravity, not just in his personal life, but in his public message, started to shift. When he founded Turning Point USA, he really found it initially as kind of an anti-socialism, limited government organization there. The old slogan for Turning Point was "Big government sucks, socialism sucks," something like that there. To be clear, he definitely still believed that, but the focal point really shifted. He kind of, I think, saw himself correctly as something of a younger person's Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is famous for kind of the, make your bed in the morning, kind of get off to a good start of the day, kind of, that's his message. What Charlie would say is, that girl in your life, maybe ask her on a date, maybe ask for her hand in marriage, maybe actually have some children there, go to synagogue, go to church, study scripture, study Bible, honor the Sabbath. He actually kept his version of the Jewish Sabbath. He turned his phone off from Friday night to Saturday night. This is a man who used to learn Torah with Dennis Prager, who literally has a forthcoming book. I hope it's still being published this December on the Sabbath. The title of this book is Stop in the Name of God, literally about honoring the Sabbath. Just a remarkable person there who was an evangelical Christian, but was truly steeped in what Christians call the Old Testament, what we refer to, of course, as the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible there. He was really kind of a throwback to the Christianity that founded and birthed America and then made America such a hospitable and flourishing place for the Jewish people, basically going back since the American founding. And, these days, as you have an ascendant strand of, shall we say, theologically tinged anti-Semitism that I find very disturbing. Charlie was, I think, one of the lions really trying to kind of push back against that, and that kind of makes this loss all the more tragic, frankly.
Josh, I promised you that would be very short and tight because of time, and we're all very busy right before the holiday. But I would like to close out by asking you how you are understanding. There are so many backlashes. There's been so tremendous praise of Charlie in recognition of his contribution, in my view, to the macro debate, discussion about where the West is going. But there's also been some very ugly blowback, talking about Charlie, discussing him as having been, on the one hand, co-opted by Israel, on the other hand, being on the verge of disowning or, separating himself from his support for Israel, for Jews. There's so much ugly in the mix. And there are some very prominent names that previously were considered to be right-wing pundits who have come out since his death and made appalling comments, in my view, and cast aspersions on his intellectual integrity and his personal integrity. Why is that happening, do you think? I don't want to say the names because I don't want to give them any more attention than they already have. But why are we seeing this phenomenon, Josh?
I mean, some people just literally anything or everything that happens that is bad, it automatically becomes the Jews. I mean, this is a story that is literally as old as time, is it not? I mean, there are some people that just ascribe all of their problems, whether at a micro level or at a macro level, to the Jewish people. Again, it's something that Charlie personally was adamantly against. He has this amazing clip, by the way, this clip that I just saw for the first time, maybe like a week and a half, 2 weeks before his death, where he takes like this question from the audience. Guys, we're going to keep asking him about anti-Semitism. And Charlie just goes in like a 3.5 minute, beautiful, amazing rant about how, like, basically, like, screw you. If your life's in shambles and you're blaming the Jews, like, take matters into your own hands. Go to the gym, work out, lose some weight, get in a diet, go ask a girl out, go to church. I mean, like, take steps to improve your lives. So he was such a vociferous opponent of this stuff there. These people that are trying to, somehow say that his death was attributable either to Jewish people or to Israel, it's just pure unmitigated conspiratorial anti-Semitism. It is gutterball stuff. Absolute shame on some of the folks who are amplifying some of these fringe voices who really ought to know better, because there have been some amplifiers, not just some originators. Right. Again, sticking to our policy here of not naming names, but there have been some amplifiers who really ought to know better there. And, to try to make Charlie Kirk, I mean, the guy who literally was learning biblical Hebrew, who turned his phone off when Orthodox Jews turned their phone off, to try to make him out to be some sort of try to posthumously convert him to far right anti-Semitism or neo-Nazism or whatever there. It is such a desecration, frankly, of the blessed memory of someone who was an amazing friend of the Jewish people, who went above and beyond to befriend Jews like me. I know that person because he literally did it to me, and there are so many like us there. Many of his earliest mentors in the movement, Dennis Prager, David Horowitz, folks like that, were Jewish there. So it's just appalling, and these people really ought to know better. But the fact that they don't know better, frankly, is why they're doing it in the first place there. But ultimately, the last laugh, I think, will be on them, because there's just so much content out there, so much content of Charlie Kirk just saying the truth about the Jewish people, about Israel there, that no matter how much they try to whitewash his legacy and try to pin untimely and premature death on the Jewish people or Israel there, it's just patently untrue. I know that because I can literally personally vouch for it on a very personal, detailed level. And there is a massive archive of internet videos that will tell the truth for many generations to come.
You've lost a good friend. We've all lost a champion for the West, for the Jews, and for moral clarity. Josh Hammer, I don't have Charlie's reach, but I'll do my best to promote your book. Make sure that all the information is on the website so that people can see and pick it up and read it because it's superb. Thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time today, and wishing you a happy, healthy new year.
Shana Tova U'Matika. Thank you very much.
I leave you now with a clip that's about 4 minutes long of Charlie's wife, Erica Kirk, speaking yesterday at his funeral. It's heart-wrenching, it's beautiful, and I think and expect that Erica Kirk will continue Charlie's incredible legacy, and she will definitely be a force to be reckoned with. Erica and Charlie were the parents of 2 small children, a 3-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. And watch as she stands protected by bulletproof glass, the first day of the rest of her life. Thanks as always for being here. To those of you out there celebrating the Jewish New Year, Shana Tova. And to all of you, thanks so much for your support. Until next time.
Please give a warm welcome to Mrs. Erica Kirk.
Hello. God bless all of you for coming here from all over the world to honor and celebrate my Charlie. Just a few miles from here, 2 years ago at America Fest 2023, Charlie delivered a speech on stage for our TPUSA Faith event. Charlie loves speaking off the cuff. He was very good at that, without a script. So I personally didn't know what he was going to say. And what he chose to speak about that day was his submission to the will of God. He quoted one of his favorite Bible verses, Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. "Here I am, Lord. Send me." After Charlie finished, I met him backstage, and I spoke to him, and I'll never forget this. I said, "Charlie, baby, please talk to me next time before you say that statement." Because when you say something like that, there is so much power in that verse. When you say, "Here I am, Lord, use me," God will take you up on that. And he did with Charlie. "11 days ago, God accepted that total surrender from my husband and then called him to his side. More than anything, Charlie wanted to do not his will, but God's will. And over these past 11 days, through all the pain, never before have I found as much comfort as I now do in the words of our Lord's Prayer, "Thy will be done."
We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.